At the Natural History Museum, we study and share stories of the amazing nature in and around Los Angeles, from the past, present, and future. Each week in this webinar series, we'll learn how and why we study nature in Los Angeles and hear from a different museum staff member who will take us behind the scenes or out into the field, showcasing the real specimens and tools they use in their work at the museum. Last week, we heard from Maze Connolly about why nature in LA is so special by taking a closer look at some of the local insects in Maze's backyard. Today will be all about the marine mammals of Los Angeles and how we learn about them. So before we meet our guest, we're going to start with a quick activity that will get us thinking about marine mammals and get our observation skills warmed up. We're going to look at an image of LA underwater during the Miocene from about 5 to 23 million years ago. If you have something to write with handy, you can take notes or sketch what you noticed. You can also type your observations in the chat and we'll share some of those out loud after a few moments. Okay, everybody ready? Let's go. Okay, what is going on in this image? Remember, you can draw or write on a piece of paper or type your ideas into the chat. Think about what you notice, anything you wonder or are curious about, or even what it reminds you of.
All right, we're getting some comments from students. Allison notices that animals are swimming. Shannon notices that the water creatures are going towards the school of fish. So a lot of movement being noticed.
All right, so we're noticing the environment and we're noticing the behavior of some of the animals in there, noticing some communities of fishes perhaps, noticing it's an aquatic environment. What more
Some
can we find?
students are noticing that there might be a dolphin in the scene.
Okay, so we're noticing an animal that has characteristics that remind us of an animal we're familiar with today, right? So perhaps that snout in the front and that fin on its back remind us of modern day dolphins. What more can we find?
Stephanie is noticing that this is kind of a scene of something that's happening potentially in the ocean. Several students are thinking that this might be kind of an ocean habitat.
All right, so we're thinking ocean, aquatic, perhaps marine. We're thinking about the ecosystem. What more?
Mia is thinking that there might be something like a manatee in this scene, and she's thinking that this manatee is not an animal that we see a lot anymore.
Ah, so what do we see that makes us think that might be a manatee?
Maybe this one right here.
What do we notice that reminds us of a manatee?
Looks like there's also some other ideas that it could be a seal.
Okay, so some difference in opinions. So we're thinking either a manatee or a seal. So maybe we're noticing some of the characteristics of the animals' bodies that remind us of those animals.
Sophia is noticing that it looks like it's kind of larger. It's a kind of a fatter animal that may be evidence that it's a manatee. And
Okay,
short fins as well from Skylar.
so we're noticing the size of the animals and remembering the size of manatees that we're familiar with and perhaps using that to compare and draw conclusions from that. What more can we find?
Dorothy is also thinking that maybe the fact that it's kind of eating seagrass may be evidence that it's a manatee.
Ah, so we're noticing that the way they're eating, we're noticing the vegetation around. So seagrass, we're thinking. So maybe the animals are having a feast there, and we know that those animals eat seagrass. So we're thinking maybe that's it.
And then a lot of students have been commenting on the kind of bird in the scene. I think some folks are thinking that it might be a seagull. Some folks are noticing that it looks like it might be kind of eating or getting ready to eat.
Oh, all right. So we're noticing the relationship between the animals above the water and below, and we're seeing what's going on down below. And somebody noticed a lot of fish, right? And so maybe we're thinking that this bird is flying down there, perhaps to catch some fish. Yeah, we'll take maybe a few more observations.
So a lot of folks are kind of looking in the background now and noticing something that kind of looks like a shark potentially also, or maybe it's this one right here, looking like they maybe are getting ready to eat something or they're kind of hanging in the background.
All right, so we're noticing animals that remind us of sharks, perhaps that iconic fin in the back, and maybe the way that animal is postured, right? The way it's kind of hanging out and lurking in the back. And then we're thinking about predator and prey relationships, right? So we know that sharks are predators usually. So we're thinking maybe these animals might be lunch for those sharks in the back.
See, one more comment. Chris is noticing that there is a lot of, like you said, the kind of predator-prey relationship happening. There's a lot of animals that are eating other animals.
Yeah, so we're noticing some biodiversity in the different kinds of animals that we're seeing. And we're noticing that it's kind of a whole food chain down there, right? We've got different kinds of animals eating other animals, maybe, and maybe eating the grasses. Pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your observations. So we noticed a lot of different animals in this environment that remind us of animals we might see today. We also noticed the relationships between those animals, wondering about predator and prey relationships. And we noticed that vegetation. I believe someone said seagrass down there. Thanks again, everyone. So at the museum, we love looking really closely at nature to see what we notice and what we can learn about nature from our observations. So today we'll be meeting with Jorge Velez-Juarbe, Associate Curator of Marine Mammals in the Mammalogy Department at NHM. Mammalogy is the study of mammals. Hi, Jorge.
Hi, morning.
Morning. So happy to have you with us today.
Yeah, I'm very happy as well.
All right, Jorge. So can you start by telling us a little bit about your work at the Natural History Museum and what a day might look like for you?
So here at the museum, I'm the curator of marine mammals, and that includes fossil and extant species. So I am kind of in between or split between two collections, which altogether they make up one of the largest collections of marine mammals in the whole world. So a typical day, it's very variable from week to week. So some days I get to do research all day long. Some other days I get to do just a little bit of research, and my day gets split between meetings and um, other things I have to do in the museum. Sometimes I have very rare occasions I go out on strandings. We're part of the stranding network. So when a whale or dolphin washes up dead in LA County, we sometimes go pick up the carcass and we bring it to our marine mammal warehouse where it gets processed, and we remove the flesh and we keep the bones as part of our collection so they can be studied by me or by any other visiting researcher. So it's highly variable. Some other days I get to have a lot of fun, and I'm not here in the museum, but I'm out in the field looking for fossils or traveling sometimes to a conference. So it's highly variable.
Very cool. So no regular day for you.
No, never.
Um, you mentioned a couple of things actually that I would like you to expand on a little. So you said you study extant animals, so living animals, right, for our
A little
students.
bit, yeah.
And then you mentioned the marine warehouse. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so we have a warehouse in Vernon where we keep all the large specimens, and mainly all the marine mammals are stored in that warehouse, because we have, you know, blue whale skulls, which we wouldn't have a good space to keep here in our collections in the main museum. So we've had the museum has had that warehouse, an ideal area to deflesh some of the specimens we bring in, because it can get really smelly sometimes, and it's like a slow process of macerating and cleaning the specimens. So it's a really cool warehouse, but it's also smelly, especially in the summer when temperatures get over 100. But it's a great place, and we have hundreds of specimens and sometimes we get to keep, or sometimes the specimens are fresh enough that we keep some of the soft tissue in jars in special fluids so they can be studied, things like stomach content, so we can get an idea of what these marine mammals are eating, eyes, brains, guts, fetuses, everything. Sometimes parasites, which we also keep in our collection. So it's a great resource for many researchers, and it really gives us a very good idea of the marine mammals that are found in the Southern California coastline.
Very cool. Yeah, we wouldn't want to have all that near our offices, right? All right. So Jorge, could you share a little bit about your journey to the museum?
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second and I will share. So we are here in California, right? But I am originally from Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. It's kind of far away, very different climate. Small island, so easily in a day I can be in a tropical rainforest and then go to the beach in the afternoon, or do it backwards. It's for me it's home, of course, and so it's a beautiful day. And I was born and raised there, and I lived there for more than half of my life up to this point. I was born in the 80s. Like any kid, I had my thematic birthdays when it was possible. And at a very early age, like when I was 8 years old, I got interested. I got this sticker album at school, and I was buying all the stickers and putting them together. And there was one showing paleontologists, and to me, these first images of paleontologists, to me, they were boring because it was these all white dudes in white lab coats in a lab, especially the one in the middle, which looks like he's looking at this gigantic bone, and you see in a microscope, which, as an 8-year-old, I was like, why is he doing that? Now I know that he was looking at the internal structure of the bones. But then there was this other image of a geologist finding dinosaur eggs in the Gobi Desert, and that's the image that stuck with me. That was like, this is what I want to do. It's this part of the adventure of going out and making these discoveries. So when the time came, I don't know, up until I'm a product of the public school system in Puerto Rico. And then I went to the University of Puerto Rico, where I learned about geology, which, paleontology is paleontology is a combination of many different subjects. Geology is one of them. We know we need to learn how to kind of read the rocks to know where we can find fossils. So that's a lot of what I learned while I was doing my undergraduate degree at the University of Puerto Rico. And then I went on to do graduate school, to do a PhD at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where I specialized. That's where I really started my specialization in marine mammals. And then I graduated in 2012 with a PhD, and I did a postdoc looking for fossils in Panama, based off the University of Florida joined with the Smithsonian in Panama. And then from 2014 to present, I've been curator here at the museum, working with the amazing collection of marine mammals that we have.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, exposure is so important, representation, and really knowing what's out there. And I love that term that you used, reading the rocks, right? Because that's really what you're learning to do. You're learning a new language. Awesome. Awesome pictures too. Love it. Thanks for sharing, Jorge. Jorge, so can you tell us a little bit about how we learn about marine mammals at the museum? Maybe show us some specimens, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I do here at the museum, I use the collections to learn about extinct species for the most part. So I need to read up on a lot of information on the modern species, and a lot of the work I've been doing more recently, it's on pinnipeds, which include seals and sea lions and things like California sea lion, things that we can see here in the coastline sometimes, like the elephant seal, which is a big blob you see on the top left part of your screen, or California sea lions, or harbor seals, and walruses are part of this group. And normally when we see these animals when they're alive, we just see the exterior. But a lot of what I do as a paleontologist is looking at the interior, at the bones, because the flesh, it's usually not preserved, or any soft tissue is not preserved in the rocks or as fossils, only in very special, very rare occasions. So, a lot of the time I spend with specimens is just looking at skulls and skeletons of some of these living species. And here's to give you an idea. So that elephant seals, they're huge. You can see even carrying one skull of them. And the other skulls of the other things are much smaller. So that's one of the things I do a lot. And I have, so you can get an idea of the size of a walrus skull. This is a walrus skull here. Easier if I'm not sharing.
Wow.
There. Yeah. You see it's much better, bigger.
Yeah.
The tusks, which are kind of iconic for walruses. This is a modern walrus, is kind of a little bit beat up specimen, but it's one of the best ones we have. One of the things I want to point out is, this is the nose here. It's kind of heart shaped, right? And then the eye is over here, and then the palate. So a lot of for mammals, we spend a lot of time looking at their teeth and their skulls and how each different bone contact each other. So you can see these lines they're called sutures, and we see these in our skulls as well, and in some of our bones. So a lot of what I do is looking at skeletons and trying to figure out what some of these extinct species are and how they're related to their living relatives, if there are living relatives.
Very cool. That is huge. So could you tell us a little bit more about collecting or finding fossil marine mammals, what that process is like?
Yes. So let me share my screen again. So it's the process of collecting marine mammals, and actually any kind of fossil. Well, like I said before, you need to be able to read the rocks, so to say, and know where to go to collect. So there's like a lot of planning that kind of goes on before you go out into the field to find fossils. First, it's knowing where to find. So just some places I've been working at, the fossils you can see them relatively easily. Like there's some sites in Bakersfield here in California, where there's a fossil bone bed, marine bone bed that's exposed. And that illustration at the beginning, it's a reconstruction of some of the marine mammals and some of the organisms that lived in Bakersfield 14, almost 15 million years ago, when it was an ocean. Very, very different from nowadays. So there's a bone bed, and you can see lots and lots of bones. But then there are, and there are other places around in Baja California where, we go and collect fossils near the coastline, where we can see lots of rocks, lots of exposures. There are places that are maybe a little bit more challenging in the tropics because of the vegetation. But still, if you can have rocks of the right age, you can find fossils. So there's a lot of, growing up in Puerto Rico, I was interested in finding fossils there. So I've been working there for many, many years. And I've been going on and off to Panama several times, even after I did my postdoc there, to collect fossils, again, of marine mammals and other organisms. And there's also places in South America that I've been to, like in the coast of Ecuador, where there are rocks with dolphins and whales, or in the one of the weirdest places where we found marine fossils of marine mammals is in the Atacama region in Chile, which is one of the world's driest desert, or one of the driest places on Earth. It was an ocean, or part of it was an ocean millions of years ago, with huge whales and weird dolphins and swimming sloths and all sorts of different animals. But when we get closer to here, it's a little bit different in Southern California. So a lot of the fossils we have in our collection from LA and from Southern California are the result of development, of road constructions for housing projects, for building. And by law, whenever any type of construction is going to happen and digging of the ground, there has to be some paleontological monitors that will make sure that no fossils and also archaeological artifacts are destroyed or damaged. So things get collected a lot during this project. And I'll show you some examples of some of these areas. So in Laguna Hills, there's a whole bunch of localities where there was a lot of development in the 70s and the 80s. And we have extinct walruses from one of these sites. This is in Orange County, and then another site in Orange County in Laguna Niguel, where there's this building that has like multiple offices, including IRS offices. There's a lot of fossil localities, and we found a lot of stuff that's been collected there, from dugongs, which are related to manatees, which is what we had here up until a few million years ago. Extinct dolphins, extinct sea turtles, and a whole bunch of other things that I'm not showing at the moment, but these are just some of the best examples. So it's a very different Southern California from what it is now. There's this locality in Aliso Viejo, where this beautiful fossil in an Age of Mammals host was discovered. It's a Paleoparadox. It's a Desmostelian, which is this weird, extremely weird group of marine mammals related to sea cows, but looking more like hippo. There's no hippos in North America, but Desmostelians were there to kind of be the hippos of the ocean. And here's a better look at the skeleton. And then more close to LA, or within LA County, there's in Palos Verdes, where there's a lot of fossils that have been found over the years, including sperm whales, different species of walruses, and seals. So there's a lot that's been, in a way, a lot of these fossils have been rescued or found during development, and they've made their way to our collection so they can get studied. by whoever is interested at the moment where it's collected, or even in future generations. So it tells us, it gives us like a very different image of what not just LA but Southern California and the whole Pacific Ocean was millions and millions of years ago. How different it is. Like we don't have any walruses anymore, for example. We only have one species of very large sperm whale, whereas these extinct ones were kind of small. So it's like traveling back in time, but since we don't have any time traveling devices, no time machines, paleontology is the way to do it.
Very cool. Always an adventure, it seems like, with your job. And Jorge, am I understanding right that some students could be living or going to school in places that had some of these fossils right in their backyards?
That is right. So the
Very
sperm
cool.
whale that you're seeing called Idiophyster on the top left of your screen, that was found in a school in Palos Verdes.
Very cool.
Yeah. So even in your backyard or in a park that you may go often to, there may have been fossil discoveries, or there may be fossil discoveries to be made.
Very cool to keep that in mind when you're walking around. Think about the ancient life that was there before you. So, Jorge, you have told us about how you study ancient marine mammals by looking at fossils from around LA and the world. Can you tell us a little bit about how those extinct LA mammals and the marine mammals that live here today are special or unique?
Yeah. So I've mentioned walruses several times now. Let me tell you a little bit more about walruses, because they're one of my favorite groups, and I think they have a very a fascinating story to tell. So when we think of walruses, we think of these gigantic mammals that live around the Arctic with this big, kind of like iconic tusks. But walruses were not always like this. They were a little bit different in their past, millions of years ago. So when we look at a fossil walrus, their skulls are going to be very different. So the modern walruses, they have these big tusks. Their skulls are kind of rectangular, whereas these ancient walruses, their skulls are more long, like the ones you're seeing on your screen on the left side. And that may be a reflection of what they ate or how they ate. So kind of like like this skull on the left is one of these ancient walruses from 6 million years ago, kind of with this long skull. On the right is the skull of a living species, and they probably fed in very different ways, with this ancient walrus called Titanotaria probably like swimming actively in the ocean, preying on fish and squid, while modern walruses, they feed in a very special way. They dive down to the seafloor. They use their mustaches to find food, to detect clams. And when they find one of these clams, they dig the clams out. They hold the clamshell in their mouth with their big, very muscular lips, and they move their tongue backwards. And they create a vacuum inside their mouth, so they suck the animal out of the shell, and then they spit the shell. So, thinking of those things, when we look at the history of walruses in the whole Pacific Ocean, there were so many different species. They're all spread out from, they're found from Baja California Sur all the way around to Japan. And there's many species. And it's not only until the last 6-7 million years of their history that they start finally looking like walruses. So as a paleontologist, I try to figure out what were the evolutionary kind of like stepping stones of walruses becoming walruses, so to say. How their teeth changed, how the shape of their skulls may have changed over time. And there were also some weird, kind of weird evolutionary experiments. Things like like this other thing called Gomphotaria, which is it's kind of got the big tusk like walruses do, but they also, this is the lower jaw. It had lower tusk, so it was a four-tusk walrus. Unlike anything else that's alive or anything else known in the world. So this is what I call like I refer to things like this, like kind of in a way failed evolutionary experiments because they didn't leave any direct descendants. So those are some of the like very unique things that we find here in Los Angeles and other parts of Southern California that tells of a very different ocean 5-7 million years ago.
Very cool. Super cool to see those animal adaptations. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your work today, Jorge. We have a ton of questions, so just gonna jump right in. Let's see. Annabelle and Victoria are wondering, what is your favorite marine mammal or fossil?
That's a fantastic question. You know, it kind of changes every now and then depending on what I'm working on. But right now I will have to say fossil walruses. I don't have a particular favorite, although I love this thing. This is Gomphotaria pugnax. It's one of the weirdest things I've gotten to work on. So it's for tusk walrus. You can't say no to that.
Awesome. Javier is wondering, what was the first fossil you ever found?
The first fossil I ever found was in my grandmother's backyard. Actually, cutting through a neighbor's backyard to get to my grandmother's house, I found this rock that had a hole, and I broke it. And when I opened it, it had it was a piece of limestone. It's a type of rock, and had the imprint of a coral.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
that was the first fossil I found. I can't remember how old I was. I remember what I found and where, but I can't remember how old. I must have been like 10 or something.
Very cool. Some of our students have probably found fossils and they don't even know it yet.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so Giselle is wondering, how big is the blue whale skull?
That is a really good question. I never know exactly how big it is. I know that it wouldn't fit easily in any of the rooms here in the museum. I'll see if I can find a photo and I'll show it in a little bit. But so keep that in mind.
All right.
I do know it's huge, it's humongous.
Would you say it's what could you compare it to?
Wow.
Putting you on the spot.
larger than a school bus.
Larger than a school bus. Okay, yeah. That helps. Yeah. Larger than a school bus, the blue whale skull. That's huge. Thanks for that question, Giselle. Jason is wondering, how long does it take to fully dig out a fossil?
That's a fantastic question. It depends on how much of it we find. So and it also depends on where it is. So if it's something small, you can dig it in a few minutes. One time, actually, the first time I traveled to Panama to dig a fossil dolphin skull. It took us about 4 hours to dig it, and we were in a real hurry because it was by the beach, and the sea was. We started digging during low tide, and then while we were working, the tide started to rise again. At one point, we were surrounded by water, and we were still digging that dolphin. So we were in a real hurry. So that took about 4 hours. There's been other fossils that where that I found that are in a place with that's kind of risky because there may be some rocks from above that could fall on me. So there's one skeleton of a fossil crocodile from Puerto Rico that took me like 3 years to collect. So every time I will go back, I will see, how accessible is it. I will collect a little bit, leave it alone. So, but usually it's within, it's not that, doesn't take that much time.
Very cool. Cool to keep in mind that some fossils, you do a little bit of work and then come back later on to finish them. Okay, David is wondering, when did you start learning about fossils?
When I was about 8, when I got that sticker album I showed earlier on, it had a lot of information. Some of it which is wrong because that's how science is. It's very dynamic. It changes. But that's when I started learning. And some of the images are based on real actual fossils in museum exhibits, which I've had the pleasure to revisit. So when I was 8, that's where I started learning about these fossils. I remember I will memorize the information. I will bore my my classmates, just telling them, showing them, oh, this is Australopithecus afarensis, blah 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 blah. I liked it. It was fun, and so that's I got interested, and I got hooked on it, and I never stopped.
You're in good company. So Mrs. Bamberger's class has been following the news this week, and they're following the news of a survey of the seafloor between Palos Verdes Peninsula and Catalina Island, documenting a DDT dump, and they're wondering, is that something you've heard about, and what threats do marine mammals face today?
I heard about it. I don't know much about what kind of threats it will mean for the living marine mammals. I can assure you it's not good for them, but I don't know of the specific threats because that's kind of far from my specific line of research, but it can't be good. I do know that.
Makes sense. Okay, we have a few more minutes left, so let me try and get some in here. So Isabella, Strummer, and Adrian are all wondering, what was the rarest fossil you found?
The rarest fossil I found. I found a lot of weird stuff. I think that the rarest was a tiny arm bone of a coqui frog from Puerto Rico. And it was tiny, and I found it in 2012 while I was looking for fossils down there. I wasn't expecting to find anything like that, and it turned out to be the oldest frog from the Caribbean and the oldest of its kind from anywhere in the world. It's a frog that's 30 million years old, which is not that old for frogs, but for this particular group of frogs, it's really really old. So that was I would say that's the rarest because I haven't found any more. Just that one piece of arm bone.
Yeah, you got to have a good eye for those tiny fossils.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so let's see. So many questions. Okay, Sabina is wondering, where is your favorite place to dig?
Man, my favorite place to dig is in Puerto Rico. It's of course sounds kind of almost cliche, but it's this one locality where I discovered fossils of sea cows and crocodiles and turtles and large rodents, and that's like the place that I really always go back to. It's hard finding fossils; they're not common, and to find some of the tiny rodent teeth, we have to dig a lot of sediment and screen wash it and break it down and spend hours under the microscope looking for these tiny teeth. But it's very rewarding just like discovering something there and how it can modify what we know of the history of animals in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean region. So yeah, that would be one of my, and it's also close to my parents' house. Like a less than an hour drive. So yeah.
Makes sense. All right, so we're just about out of time, so I'm going to end with this question from Sandra. Do you love your job?
Oh, dream job. It's what I wanted to do since I was 8. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jorge. That wraps it up for us today. And thank you so much to all of our friends for joining us today. We learned so much about the marine mammals of LA and the ways that we can study them. We can't wait to continue exploring with you in this series. If you want to see more from the Natural History Museum, you can give us a follow on Instagram at NHMLA. We will also have all the videos from these presentations on our YouTube channel for you to watch later. And you can catch this recording as well as the rest of this series on youtube.com/NHMLA. If you have one more second, we hope you'll answer one more poll question on your way out. Thank you so much.